When, in the course of human events, liberty and justice for all, as envisioned in the Magna Carta, the American Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights is threatened, it becomes necessary to dissociate the social, economic, and political bands which have connected us to those destructive powers which thwart liberty. The laws of nature and of nature's God dictate we all are free to be individuals. This God-given right to individuality has been the aspiration of liberty-loving individuals from all corners of the earth. Whereas this noble aspiration is worthy of promotion and protection, we therefore, with malice toward none, and peace toward all, declare the causes which impel this dissociation. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all human beings are created equally free to be. This natural state of individuality is hindered when inalienable rights are denied. Among these rights are life, liberty, freedom of expression, freedom of association, equality of opportunity, protection of property, and the right to pursue happiness. That to secure these rights, governments, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, are instituted of the people, by the people, and for the people. That whenever powers that threaten the continuance of liberty promote a form of governance that is destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to organize themselves in a manner that minimizes the impact of these destructive forces. Chief among the powers in opposition to individuality include socialism and communism. Under these systems, we are not free to be. Notwithstanding the repugnant nature of the social, political, and economic environment toward which many socialists and communists have propelled us, we nevertheless choose not to abandon our native country. We instead pledge by our sacred honor to do all in our power to create a digitally united alliance for liberty, for the purpose of promoting the advancement of freedom and liberty the world over. A digital nation among the nations of the world where we are free to be. Prudence indeed dictates that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. Accordingly, all experience shows that when significant changes in structural governance are promoted, those governed are better served when all viewpoints are heard and permitted to impact any contemplated changes. De facto censorship exists when channels of communication are dominated by organizations that share the same political, social, and economic views and impose unpleasant consequences to those with differing viewpoints. Under such circumstances, we the people are not free to be. This long train of abuses and usurpation, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to resign the people to live under absolute totalitarianism. That being the case, it is the right, it is the duty of the people to reject this destruction of liberty and to provide new dispositions for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of defenders of liberty, and such is now the necessity which compels us to create this digital nation to forestall the absolute tyranny over all aspects of life toward which the governed are headed if the forces arrayed against freedom prevail. We are not organized. We are not an organization. We are individuals concerned with the preservation and promulgation of a system of governance that can best advance liberty and freedom for all. We don't need a leader. We need leadership, exhibited by tens of millions of individuals willing to do what they justly can do to ensure individual liberty shall not perish from this earth. We believe in law and order. Each in our own way and in myriad different ways do what we can to preserve and expand our freedom to be. We the people have the residual power and authority when necessary to secure the continuation of our God-given rights. The authority to govern us is granted by us. The granting of this authority is not a one and done proposition. We the people can at any time revoke that authority in whole or in part. Not so much as a single individual, mind you, but as tens of millions of like-minded, digitally united individuals defending liberty. Governments at any level do not have rights. Only people have rights granted to them by their Creator. Governments have legitimate power only to the extent that power is granted to them by the governed. As a practical matter, governments are administered by people. People are human beings. Human beings do not easily give up power, irrespective of how much power they have or how they acquired it. Alas, once given power, it is human nature to work to keep and expand it. We recognize those who govern will do what they consider is in their best interest, not necessarily what is in the interest of the governed. To expect otherwise is to expect them not to be human. Over time, those in power tend to organize government in a manner that is more and more resistant to the relinquishment of power. More and more, those in power create laws, rules, and regulations from which they are exempt. This tendency is especially acute during times of crisis. There is never any guarantee an all-powerful government will be benevolent. All-powerful governments often unjustly bring the full force of the state upon lowly individuals. In such cases, a single individual is powerless to petition redress. Simply because an action is lawful does not mean it is just. Slavery was once lawful, as was denying equal rights to women in most parts of the world. Neither was nor is ever just. Human beings are, at the very least, inclined toward a particular political point of view, and always give greatest consideration to the impact of their actions on their own personal fortunes. That's human nature. Too often, those who decide how to interpret the law can be open or vulnerable to bribery, coercion, or group pressure. These all too human characteristics lead to an inconsistent application of laws, rules, and regulations. We acknowledge that those in power will never move to limit their power. Consequently, there is no political solution or resolution to our predicament. Our only course to secure our liberties is to create systems wherein the actions of the powerful matter less and less to our everyday lives. To our great fortune, a digital world exists wherein we can create systems that mitigate the damages of destructive powers. One person, 5, 10, 50, 100, even 1,000 are vulnerable to these destructive powers. Not so powerless are millions of digitally united individuals for liberty. Individuals anywhere in the world free to be, as envisioned in the Magna Carta, the American Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, and other freedom-focused governing charters. The problem is, freedom-loving individuals are poorly organized at a time when the future belongs to those who are well organized. Our disconnectedness is the greatest impediment to ensuring the world is a place where future generations are free to be. For more than a century, the enemies of liberty have been playing the long game, a game designed to fundamentally change limited governance, personal responsibility, and free enterprise to unlimited government, total dependence of the individual upon the state, and the means of production under the totalitarian command and control of the state. As these causes which impel this dissociation have continually occurred over these past many decades, we have consistently objected in the most humble terms to this destruction of our liberties. Sadly, our repeated peaceful protestations have been answered by attempts, sometimes violent, to erode our God-given rights further and to cancel the legitimacy of our worldviews. Those whose character is marked by such tyranny are unfit to govern free people. We have not been wanting in attention to those who have attempted to make a case that socialism and communism are superior to free enterprise. We have considered it our duty to point out history has evidenced the abject failure of these discredited systems. We have warned that socialism and communism inevitably extend an unwanted jurisdiction over free people. Further, history shows that only free enterprise is consistent with innate human incentives which lead all to actions each believes to be in the actor's enlightened self-interest, enlightened by a self-imposed social contract which restrains lovers of liberty from pursuing actions which infringe on others' freedom to be. We have reminded these destructive powers of the circumstances of the immigration of millions from despotic nations and their settlement into freedom-loving nations. We have appealed to their native sense of justice and fairness. We have entreated them by the ties of our common humanity to disavow actions that diminish our liberties, and cautioned failure to do so would inevitably impel us to interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and of universal kinship. We must, therefore, reaffirm the necessity of our dissociation. We hold all who stand against life, liberty, freedom of expression, freedom of association, equality of opportunity, private property, and the right to pursue happiness, enemies of humanity. Therefore, we the people who oppose the political worldviews that threaten our freedom to be, as envisioned in the Magna Carta, the American Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights, join together, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do in the name and by the authority of the good people here, solemnly publish and declare that these joined individuals of the digitally united Alliance for Liberty rightfully are free to dissociate the social, economic, and political bands which have connected them with powers that would destroy life, liberty, freedom of expression, freedom of association, equality of opportunity, private property, and the right to pursue happiness. That we are resolved not to abandon our native country or give up our citizenship therein, but we join together in this digitally united Alliance for Liberty with the fervent belief that the dual citizenship this declaration creates will be instrumental in furthering the cause of liberty throughout the world. Through our united efforts, we give birth to a digital nation predicated on adopting the best human interaction practices and employing newly created systems that actualize the best intentions of the Magna Carta, the United States Constitution, and the Bill of Rights, especially to ensure we are free to be in perpetuity, a digital nation among nations consisting of those dedicated to a peaceful resistance to the current march toward tyranny and the inevitable loss of our individual identity tyrannies impose. We will not be compelled to rush hell-bent toward the destruction of a system of governance that has done more to elevate the quality of life for everyday people than any other created system. Further, we unite to institute new associations among like-minded liberty lovers based upon such principles and organizing in such form that seem most likely to effectuate our safety and happiness, including, in due time, new institutions, means of communication, commerce, and mutually acceptable common mediums of exchange outside the control of autocratic monoliths. Our aim is to abate to the fullest extent possible our reliance upon or our economic support of powers that hold worldviews which, whether by design or not, tend toward the ruination of the freedoms and liberties many of our progenitors fought so long and hard to bequeath to us, and by extension, to all humanity. Regarding the power of behemoth corporate interests, we must find alternative sources of goods and services so we do not financially support those who stand for that which leads to the destruction of our cherished liberties. Except in those extreme cases where alternatives are non-existent for goods and services that are essential to our well-being, we will not acquire goods and services from powers whose actions are prima facie evidence they support ideas that are antithetical to our freedom to be. Thus, we reduce to an absolute minimum any interaction with powers deemed to be supportive of actions that contribute to the loss of individual liberty and freedom. We hereby agree that to unjustly deprive someone of either life, liberty, freedom of expression, freedom of association, equality of opportunity, private property, or the right to pursue happiness is a crime against humanity. We declare that every living human being has the right to inquire, the right to hear, the right to speak, the right to be heard, the right to unfiltered information, the right to criticize, the right to hold unpopular opinions, the right to peacefully protest, the right to independent thought, the right to their own conscience, the right to self-protection, the right to the fruits of their own labor. We can no more surrender these rights than we can relinquish ownership of our very life. We call people of all faiths and no faith to stand together against those who would forbid holding any thoughts other than those sanctioned by authoritarian actors. We hereby reject those who, for their own economic or political advantage, or for any other reason, attempt to divide and kindle animosity between and among the governed. We pledge to one another an undying dedication to extinguish forever thoughts of supremacy based upon race, creed, color, ethnicity, national origin, sex or sexual orientation, religious belief or non-belief. The actions we undertake to secure our freedom to be are first and foremost non-violent. Violence, except in the defense of self and others, is always wrong and counterproductive. Christ, Gandhi, and Martin Luther King Jr. are just three superlative examples of what can be accomplished through peaceful means. We mirror their actions to peacefully prevent the destruction of our God-given rights. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.